People in 2000 just don't understand that we can live a decent life when we have both material and spiritual resources. They are the two wheels of a cart. Making money is a very good thing, but at the same time, you need to develop your inner self. After all, we are born with a choice, to be rich or to remain poor for the rest of our lives. If you choose to stay poor all your life, you will never be rich, no matter how hard you try. If you were a greedy moneylender in a previous life, you will choose to suffer the opposite in your new life. In such a case, someone betrays you or runs away with your money. No matter what you do, you will never become a rich person. When you are born, you should have made up your mind and chosen such a life. But just before you were born, you were blown away by a cowardly wind and said, "No." There are some spirits who refuse to be born. I don't want to be born. In such cases, stillbirths and miscarriages occur. Mizuko, miscarried fetus, is a spirit that has been blown by a timid wind and has escaped to the spirit world without permission. It's a different story if the abortion was done for human reasons. So, what should you do? All you can do is to live your life to the fullest, to the best of your ability, until the end. There is nothing more that can be asked of a human being. Don't be defeated by a cowardly wind. Don't run back to the spirit world. Give courage to all the spirits who have been born into the human world with courage. I want to pray, bless those, physical, spirits. After 3,000 years, this knowledge will be common knowledge. After 3,000, all religions that existed in 2000 will cease to exist and become meaningless. Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam will all be shattered to pieces, and there will be no believers except for a few fanatics. The main reason is that the true nature of the spirit world will become known to everyone. Thanks to the advancement of technology, we will have flying cars, the moon and Mars will be reachable by human science, people and robots will be almost indistinguishable just by looking at them, and the average age of people will be 100 years old due to the advancement of medicine. On the other hand, there are bad things such as frequent collisions of flying cars, various riots on Mars caused by lower spirituality than on Earth, and major accidents on the space station. These are just a few examples. The space accidents that will occur within a few decades from the year 2000 are accidents caused by collisions between space junk and satellites. Collisions with space debris are inevitable, so be prepared. I can't put up a timeline. This is because tampering with history without permission is a serious crime. I would like you to understand that there will always be people who will play tricks on you. This is because when history changes, there will be people in the future who will not be born. This is an act that interferes with the plans of the spirit world, and will be punished as a criminal. Even in the year 2000, there were a small number of advanced human beings who were aware of the existence of the spirit world, although they did not have psychic vision. In the case of those who understand it well, they will say, "I want to tell the truth to as many people as possible. No gratuity is necessary. I just want to spread the truth to the world, and help people who have useless superstitious beliefs, needless fears, and hassles." It's like telling the truth of the spiritual world one by one to people who have come to the time when they can accept it, so it doesn't spread explosively at once, but slowly. I would like people to remember that spiritual inspiration can be transmitted across time and space. When a plague epidemic broke out in the West, a prophet once said, "In 200 years from now, mankind will be able to kill the plague in this way." Whether true or not, it would be hard to imagine that humans in 2000 could receive spiritual inspiration from beyond time and space. With the permission of the spirit world, it is permissible to send inspiration to scientists who have lived in the past. It would be to the credit of the scientist, but it would be to the credit of the spirit world's help. It happened that it was a scientist who did it. It is true that we can obtain inspiration from beyond time and space, but in order to do so, we must develop our humanity, avoid selfishness, and make it our greatest virtue to live a life of service to others. For such a person, spiritual inspiration, which transcends time and space, will be at full effect. About suicide. It would be more accurate to say that it is more like being at the bottom of the spiritual world, wearing many layers of black plastic bags and saying, "It's dark, I'm in pain." There is no darkness anywhere, but the person himself has created the darkness. If a person who was supposed to live until the age of 70 commits suicide at the age of 40, he will certainly continue to suffer for the next 30 years, but depending on his level of remorse, he can be lifted out of the dark world relatively early. It's not easy, though. However, they will have to be reborn again and live a life full of temptation to commit suicide again. In this sense, the endless loop of suffering is true in a sense. Even if you try to refuse to be born, you will be forced to be born, so it is a futile resistance. In the case of spirits who have evolved to a certain degree and lived a proper life without committing suicide, they may be exempted from being born, but they will be assigned a different job. After the murderer of the previous life is reborn, the atonement for the sin of the previous life may end with the end of being killed by someone. Even the murderer of the previous life cannot remember because his memory has been erased. Then, we have no choice but to try and do everything we can for the sake of the world and for the sake of others. If a person who has devoted himself to the service of others for decades is exempted from the end of being killed and is changed to. This is true. This is a true story. This story, which is common knowledge to most people after 3000 AD, is a difficult truth to understand for people in 2000. You just have to think, some people say weird things. The kind of suffering you are experiencing in your life at the moment will give you some idea of your spiritual development. The lowest level of suffering is the suffering of starvation. Refugees in Africa, for example. When we get to the level where we are no longer suffering from hunger, we are now faced with the hardship of money. You don't starve, but the financial hardship is unbearable. When you reach a level where you can get rid of the financial hardships of the world, ordered to disseminate spiritual knowledge. In this process, they are often called fools and suffer from the difficulty of spreading spiritual knowledge. It can be roughly divided into hunger, suffering from money, and suffering from the spread of spiritual knowledge. In fact, the suffering of not having money is greater than that of starvation, and the suffering of spreading spiritual knowledge is greater than that of not having money. That part is almost incomprehensible to people who have a physical body. In the case of the spirit world, you can learn far more things than human beings, and you can help with healing performed in the human world, acquire knowledge and skills, acquire tremendous knowledge, and do tasks that you cannot imagine in the human world. It will be. However, the work in the spirit world is the right person for the right job, it is not making money, and it is very Rather than having your palm or physiognomy read and praying for good luck, helping the socially vulnerable and those in need will result in an incomparable level of prayer for good luck. I can say that with confidence and clarity. Furthermore, it is difficult to attach evil spirits to those who are moving and have the attitude of let's do something useful for the sake of the world. The wavelengths of good and evil do not match. The members of the Kamikaze Squadron during World War II died believing that they were truly useful to their country, so they would not be blamed for their deaths. On the other hand, if they commit suicide with the motive of I'm having a hard time in life, so I'll just die, they will be punished. As for the murder mentioned above, you will have to pay for your crime according to the degree of selfishness. However, if the person is mentally retarded or something like that, that is a different story. In the year 2000, it is pathetic because of the lack of such basic spiritual knowledge. I want you to know that fact. When one person is sad, more than dozens of people are sad in the spirit world. On the contrary, if you are happy to succeed in your life, your friends in the spirit world are also happy. There are always dozens or more companions in the spirit world. The most painful thing for our friends in the spirit world is that sometimes we are not allowed to intervene when they are suffering on earth. The suffering they have to endure at this time is even greater than that of the people on earth. Because of this, human beings in the year 2000 are given enough rest after they die and enter the spirit world. When they tried to start moving, they were told, "Rest now." The spirits in the spirit world would say, you still need rest. Before you are born, your approximate lifespan is determined. The approximate schedule after birth is also determined. A person with a life expectancy of about 40 years will never live for 70 or 80 years. I chose the test of being born in the human world and having to live a life of endless hardship and suffering. Because, after returning from the human world, great progress will be made. However, the wisdom, experience, and abilities in the spiritual world must be put on hold for a time. We have to start from scratch and endure severe trials. There is a possibility of being guided on the wrong path, and at worst, it is possible to lose the trial and commit suicide. Therefore, I would like to ask you, my guardian spirit, to work powerfully from the spirit world to give me guidance and direction so that my schedule after my birth will go as planned. I would like to ask for guidance so that we can reach the spiritual truth by working from the spirit world. Born in the human world after obtaining the consent of the spirit world. The guardian spirit gives humans unreserved and harsh trials so that they can live their lives as planned. However, if a person arrives at the spiritual truth, understands it, and begins to make efforts to live a life in accordance with it, the guidance from the spiritual world can be called a great success. However, there are many people who become corrupt afterwards, especially money-making spiritualists. For many humans after 3000, this knowledge falls into the category of common sense. That's why people who only think about making money are to be despised. You can say that disasters are also the handiwork of God. Why doesn't God stop the disaster? You would think. The reason is as follows. If there were no hardships in life and everything goes as you wish, the current level of humanity on earth would be full of lazy people who just don't take any action themselves. Such a situation cannot be good. That's why God prepares suffering, pain, and anguish. The earth exists as a training ground to forge souls that can endure suffering and work hard on their own. The catastrophe that occurred in Japan was meant to awaken the conscience of humanity. The circle of support has spread from all over the world. But of course, those who ran away while in a position to do something will be ashamed of their stupidity after entering the spirit world. This includes politicians who let their families flee to distant places. As long as you are alive, you will never be able to escape from such suffering. Even the recluse people who depend on their parents are suffering. I don't know if I can go on like this. But I don't have the power to act. I don't have any work experience. If you live your life following the voice of your conscience as much as possible, you will be able to rest and relax after death. This is the message from humanity after 3000. In the first place, though, being born on Earth itself is the same as being sentenced to island hopping. The reason for this is that there is an extreme bias toward money and material greed, and an extreme lack of room for spiritual truth. When you are born, God gives you a guardian angel, guardian spirit, saying, God will not leave you on an island without a friend. Otherwise, we would not even be able to live properly on Earth. As for the universe in the year 2000, there is only one planet in the universe that is at war. This is an amazing truth. There is no war except on Earth. Every time there is a war, the spirit world becomes like a field hospital, with terrified spirits. So the spirit world has to deal with the spirits that are just crying and crying. There are too many of them, and they say, it is no longer possible for human beings on Earth to save themselves on their own. The decision was made to spread a certain amount of spiritual truth on the Earth, and spiritual facts are being spread little by little under a collective leadership system. The only thing I can say about spirituality is that once it is acquired, it can never be lost again. However, the need for spiritual truth does not come to the fore because it has fallen into material and monetary supremacy. Letters and Buddha images do not mean much. It is the content of the inspiration that should be valued. The only way for the earth to become a paradise is for humanity to accept more spiritual truths and facts. Because of the lack of it, when we look at the earth from the spirit world, it looks like a star floating in the darkest darkness. For spirits who have achieved a certain level of spiritual evolution, coming down to earth is like coming down to a stinking swamp, and the correct answer is coming down in pain. The reason for this descent is to give us spiritual inspiration. For the sake of the evolution of the Earth's human race, we will temporarily leave our various roles and pleasures in the spirit world behind. At great cost, billions and tens of billions of spirits are working for the spiritual evolution of the entire Earth from the spirit world. 5 to 10 times more spirits than the Earth's population must form a large army and devote themselves to the dissemination of spiritual truths. You can't open the path of salvation for yourself. That was the Earth in the year 2000. Since the year 3000, the results of these efforts have become quite apparent, though it is strictly forbidden by the law of the spirit world to publish it unnecessarily. What can be said is as follows. The only planet in our solar system that is less spiritual than Earth is Mars. All the other planets, including Jupiter, are on a higher spiritual level than Earth. In the year 2000, human beings were not able to communicate with a planet with a very high spiritual level, so it would not be a problem for us to admire Jupiter, which is more spiritual than the Earth, or use it as an encouragement. The Moon has a higher spiritual level than the Earth. The reason why the spirit of a human being who has landed on the Moon and returned to Earth becomes stable and calm is because the action by the star with a higher spiritual level extends to the spiritual world. Even the astronauts' personalities can be changed to be calm. Even the humans of 2000 could understand this. Do you know the famous novel about the octopus-like aliens on Mars who attacked the Earth? That's not a coincidence, it's because they instinctively sensed the low spirituality of Mars. The inspiration was given to a famous writer who turned it into a novel. However, both Earth and Mars are evolving rapidly. In 2000, there is only one other star in the universe where life forms like human beings live and have a lower spirituality than the Earth. Furthermore, there are no stars in the universe that are waging war, except the Earth. For this reason, the future will be better because there are far more spirits than people on Earth, and they are forming a huge army to save the people of Earth. The people who are suffering on Earth now will be living with an incomparable sense of happiness the next time they are reborn. Even if you are suffering from a lot of problems, do your best and live your life to the fullest. Simply put, a crime is judged by its motivation. You will not be guilty only if you did not know anything about the crime. If a retarded person and a normal person commit the same crime, the normal person will be judged more heavily because he or she has been given the ability to reason and think properly beforehand. The more knowledge and ability you have, the more responsibility you have. So, if a lawyer misuses his knowledge to commit a crime, the crime will be more serious. If you use someone to commit a crime, the punishment will take into account all aspects of the crime, including the fact that the person who directly ordered the crime lacked reason or was completely unaware of the crime. Even without direct action, the person who gave the order cannot be exonerated of guilt. This is because there is no place to hide in the spirit world. In the human world, it looks like a win-win situation if you can get away with being wanted, but from the spirit world, you can see everything. The situation of the crime. Whether the crime could not have been avoided by the person's reasoning, and all other aspects are taken into consideration before judgment is rendered. This should explain why the number of crimes has decreased drastically since the year 3000. You may think you have escaped, but in fact you have not. We will be judged in the spirit world. This is because it is a common knowledge of many people, and this knowledge is widely spread. One more thing. After the year 3000, the difference between the lazy and the hard-working will become quite obvious. I don't want to work. I don't want to work, so I'm going to get welfare. But in the after 3000 world where there are many psychics, the psychics will often see through your laziness, and you won't succeed if you just try to get money by being lazy. To put it simply, the auras of those who make an effort and those who do not make an effort are different, and the psychics can see it all. Even if you want to cheat, it is difficult to do so in the post-3000 world. it is better to think that lies and deceit will be accepted with open arms only in the early 2000s. This is because the percentage of psychics will eventually increase.